Story 1. Before the safe word existed, I was on a terrible first date at a bar. The man was very hands-on and wouldn't stop touching me. I excused myself to the restroom, and a kind bartender came to check on me. She noticed I looked uncomfortable and asked if I needed help. I said yes, and she told the man to pay his tab and leave because the date was over. She was a legend. Story 2. A man was groping girls, and all I did was point him out to the bartender who knew me and said, "This man." The large bartender said, "Hell no," and grabbed him by the scruff quickly. Story 3. Somewhat unrelated, a friend and I were out for drinks and two people were clearly on a date on the stools next to us. She went to the bathroom, and a minute later my friend elbowed me and pointed at the lady's glass where a pill was dissolving. We had a discreet discussion about the best way to handle this. Take him outside and confront him or tell the bartender. We told the bartender, and she quickly tossed the drink and went to meet the woman in the bathroom before ejecting the man. The woman was terrified, and there was no calling the police because the pill was gone at that point, down the drain. I have never been much of a fighter, but I still wished we had confronted that man. Story 4. Oh, this happened to me, but not the way you think. My wife and I thought it would be fun to try the old role play of pick me up in the bar. Smoothly, I ordered her a drink from across the bar. She eventually came over, and we chatted a bit. As we were starting to leave, the bartender checked to make sure she was okay with me leaving with her. "Yeah, he's my husband. He just has bad game." I respected that bartender, though. Story 5. I worked at a nightclub where the women's restroom had a panic button. It helped many young women escape from dangerous situations. Story 6. I got frustrated with a bartender the other night because multiple people had to complain or ask for help about a really drunk guy, and nothing happened. The bartender even said he was bothering her. So why not kick him out? He asked my friend if she had ever had 8 orgasms in one night. He kept coming up to me and insisting I come over and sit with him, not accepting no for an answer. When I was doing karaoke, he stood arm to arm with me, which was really uncomfortable, and he kept bothering people. He even came up behind a man and gave him a full bear hug. The man was really nice about it at first, but after the drunk man would not let go despite repeated requests, the man had to get rude. We kept trying to secretly signal to the bartender. We even started blatantly saying this guy was being weird, and she still did nothing. It was super frustrating to deal with. Story 7. It started like any other awkward first date. Small talk, drinks, nothing too weird. But halfway through, he leaned in, smiled, and said, "If you ever ghost me, just remember, I'm really good at finding people." My stomach dropped. I laughed it off, excused myself, and went to the bar. I told the bartender I needed an angel shot with a twist. He didn't even blink, just gave me a quiet nod and walked away. A minute later, security showed up and asked the man to step outside. Turned out he had a knife on him. I still don't know what would have happened if the staff hadn't stepped in, but they handled it professionally. I went home shaken but safe. Story 8. It's not the same thing, but one time when I worked at a convenience store, a regular walked in and asked me to walk out to the car with her because her ex-boyfriend was outside and wouldn't leave her alone. I gladly did it. I was the only man at the store. I'm sure the man laughed to himself when he saw my 5'3" scrawny self escorting his ex to the car. He tried to talk to her, and I got in between them and told him to leave or I would call the police. He left peacefully and quickly, so that was the end of it for me. I just wanted to say thank you for all the kind comments and awards. I appreciate the compliments. Story 9. I didn't use a code phrase, but I was having pizza in a small park where you can see the whole area at once. As I was sitting, a man approached and started talking to me. I was very uninterested. I said a bunch of things to try to discourage him, but he kept being very pushy. I went back into the pizza restaurant, saying I needed to use the restroom. Once inside, I asked if there was a back door to an alley or another exit because the man was being very creepy, and I needed a way out. One of the cooks guided me through the kitchen and out the back. Thanks, Chris. Story 10. I work as a disc jockey and have a few success stories. My favorite is texting a picture from the booth of a man to security. then watching him calmly escorted out 30 seconds later. Another time, I was in a much more visible booth while the other disc jockey was performing. I just stood there watching an obvious creep circle the dance floor before he saw me and walked out. The other disc jockey said I used a Jedi mind trick to make him leave. Story 11. My manager had to do this. Poor woman was being stalked by her ex, and she asked if Angela was working. He said of course and took her upstairs to meet her until the police arrived to deal with the man. The second worst part is, it was lucky he was trained for that because none of the rest of us were trained at all, despite there being posters around the building stating that staff were specially trained to help victims who asked for Angela. I would have known, and many of my women coworkers probably did, but not because we were trained for it. She was very fortunate to run into the right person. I don't know what happened to her after that, but I hope she is safe and well. Story 12. Serious question. Is there a different safe word for every bar? Or just a generally understood statement and serious look? I have heard some places have drinks that are ordered as a code too. Story 13. I was out with a couple of friends, and one had brought along a guy she barely knew who was essentially a rebound. He was a creep, trying to put his hands down her pants and up her top in the middle of the restaurant. Yes, an actual restaurant. At 6 p.m., so it certainly wasn't quiet. She told him no and stopped repeatedly, but he wouldn't listen and was just telling me to mind my own business. When my friends went to the toilet and he went for a smoke, I went to the bar and asked if Eileen was working, as my friend needed help. The guy knew what I meant, sent a female staff member to the toilets, and radioed the doorman, who came over and told the guy he was out of control and needed to leave. The guy threw a punch at the doorman, called me a ferret, then was dragged outside by two large doormen. The police were called, and I have no idea what happened after that. Couldn't have been handled any better. Edit to add. This was at a Weatherspoons. I thought I'd share it as a positive story since it often gets a lot of negative attention. Story 14. A stranger approached me while I was reading outside an otherwise empty coffee shop. I am a very petite woman living alone, so I went into a nearby restaurant because I did not want to walk home and have him follow me. He did follow me to the restaurant and sat down at my table as if we were on a date. My waitress did not take me seriously until I cried while he was at the bar. He ended up forcing his way into the kitchen, yelling about how he could not find his girl, and became aggressive with the staff. I was hidden in a storage room, waiting to be taken home while the waitstaff called the police for trespassing. Overall, 0 out of 5-star experience, but all of the women who helped me were very kind. I believe more places should have a safe word system. Story 15. In the mid-1980s, I went out with a friend of a friend. We went to the drive-in movies. At that time, the new orange slice soda came out. He had an open can and asked me if I wanted to taste it. I said no, but he kept asking me to try it, so I did. One small sip. The next thing I knew, I was waking up. I knew something wasn't right, so I told him I had to use the restroom. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes were red. Not bloodshot, not pink, but red. I couldn't get anyone to help me. I had to get back into the car with this guy and have him drive me angrily to my brother's apartment for a family emergency. I had used the payphone to call a friend who wasn't home, and that's when I came up with this plan. I was 17. Damn. Story 16. I didn't use a safe word, but years ago in Austin, a girlfriend and I were out. We were at the bar facing the stage to watch live music. There was a mirror behind the bar, and as I was half turned to talk to her, I noticed an old man behind her lean in to sniff her hair. I did a double take. He noticed, so he started to pretend he was leaning in to chat with her. The bartender saw this and wrote me a note asking if we needed his help. I nodded my head yes. Not even a minute later, he rounded the bar, grabbed the man by the shoulder, said, "I think the ladies want to be left alone," and made him leave. Story 17. Went on a first date with a man I met online. I am 22, he was 38, which I thought might be okay until he immediately started talking about how women my age are much more grateful and how he prefers women who have not been affected by bad relationships. He kept leaning in too close, saying he liked how innocent the first looked, and then casually started rubbing my thigh under the table while saying I seemed soft and obedient. I froze. It was the kind of touch where you do not want to make a scene, but your whole body is screaming to get away. I excused myself to go to the restroom, walked past the bar, and quietly asked the bartender if Angela was working that night. He nodded and said, "Right this way." Within a minute, a female staff member found me by the bathrooms and said someone was waiting for me outside. They walked me out the back, stayed with me while I ordered a taxi, and made sure I was safe. He texted me the next day saying he hoped I had learned to be more polite. I immediately blocked and reported him. Story 18. Sorry, this is almost entirely unrelated, but I had to grab a coworker of mine mid-sentence when she was talking to a man to pull her away and make up a lie about how it was an emergency. I worked with a girl who is, for lack of a better word, incredibly unintelligent. Unintelligent in a cute way, like a Disney character who is all smiles and a complete airhead. She was very sweet, a talented athlete and artist, but the type of girl who would try to order Uber Eats on a camping trip and not understand why that is not possible. One day, a random man came into the bar. My instincts immediately perked up when he approached the bar without sitting down and asked if another female bartender was working right then. The girl said no, she usually does not work those shifts. The man then asked if she knew when the other bartender would be working. My coworker was about to give some stranger another coworker's regular schedule. So I grabbed her and told her she was needed immediately in the kitchen. Once we were out of earshot, I told her never to give out the regular hours or personal information of other servers to strangers. She rolled her eyes and asked, "What's the big deal?" I then asked if she considered why that man did not sit down to have a drink and why he wanted to know her shifts. I told her I had never seen him before, and she has a boyfriend. I reminded her to use her head. That was a good teaching moment. I returned to the customer to ask if I could take a message. He said no, he would just come back. So I said, "Please don't." He gulped and walked out. I asked the girl he was looking for if she knew who he was. She said yes. He was a creepy man who once tried to get her number, and she told him to leave her alone. Somehow, he worked out where she worked. Never tell people your schedule. Story 19. I'm a mid-60s dad. If a young woman comes up to me and says, "Hi, uncle, granddad, or mister," you bet I'll escort her to her car or wherever she needs to be safely. I have daughters. It's dad code 101. Story 20. Not quite the same, but I had to do something similar once. A friend asked me to pretend I was her boyfriend so a creepy drunk man would not try to grind on her at a club. Another time, a random woman at a streetcar stop after bar hours asked me to sit beside her because a drunk man would not leave her alone. Story 21. Mine had a button in the bathrooms you could push, and staff would come in and escort you to the back office to pay, then out the back door to your car or rideshare. I overheard a lady talking to her friend about how she uses it to skip the lines. Staff knew her on site, and it was awkward half hiding in my stall listening in, but they still came and seemed professional about it. Story 22. I haven't. But one time I told a bartender, "Ma'am, it's my wife's birthday. We're all kind of drunk, but this guy at the end of the bar is actively antagonizing my friend, and I really don't want to get involved with her birthday and whatnot. I wonder if there's anything you can do before I call it." The bartender immediately told the guy to leave and started calling bouncers and threatening to call the police. I felt extremely taken care of by the bar staff. I think I tipped $100 on a $50 tab, but there is no telling. That was years ago. Story 23. I was a checker at a grocery store. A woman came into my line and whispered, "That man is following me," while shifting her eyes to the customer behind her. I told her not to worry. I checked her out very quickly and told her to hurry along. While I was checking him out, I made mistakes that caused me to call over a manager. I held him up long enough to be comfortable that she was safe. Story 24. I've had several women essentially grab hold of me and tell a random person that I was their boyfriend. I've been told that I have a fairly intimidating face upon first meeting someone. I have post-traumatic stress disorder, so I think that's just a byproduct of that. It's definitely not a conscious decision to look like I'm constantly ready to fight. It's a bit annoying to know that my face often tells people to stay away when that couldn't be further from who I am, but I'm happy to use it in those situations. Thankfully, none of those situations have escalated beyond me needing to raise my voice. Edit. Thanks for the kind words, everyone. You've really made me rethink how I view this part of myself. Story 25. I am in Canada, and some of the bars or popular hangout pub and grub places have an angel shot instruction sheet in all the girls' bathroom stalls. It is unfortunate that it has to exist, but I am very thankful for it. Story 26. As a person who works behind the bar and has dealt with this situation several times, my main goals are to make the woman feel safe and to remove the man without damaging his ego. Do I really care about his ego? No, but outcomes are much better if he does not react aggressively in the establishment. It is likely safer later when the staff's collective support is not available to the woman for defense. If he accepts rejection with dignity, the situation is much safer than if he is planning revenge outside. Sometimes we escort the woman out through employee-only areas. Other times, we simply keep them separated. It depends on what the woman feels is best. Story 27. As someone who has worked in several bars across the years in the United Kingdom, I have seen this used a few times. Our protocol differed slightly at each place, but the general standard was to immediately take the person back to a private space and ask for details and how we could help. It did not matter how busy it was. It was drilled into all staff to take this seriously. Usually, we would inform door staff if we had them and escort the person to a taxi by doorman or a member of staff. When I later trained staff for a new bar, I made sure they all knew how important these protocols were. To people on the other side of the bar, we bar staff pay attention. Your safety is important, and do not be afraid to use the safety tools or talk to us if you need help. Story 28. I told the bartender that someone was putting drugs in a drink there, and I got kicked out and cursed at. I was told to leave and never come back. I got her out of there safely. I wonder who put it in her drink. Story 29. So I didn't work in a bar, but a sex shop. I'm a 5'2" woman, and the majority of my staff were women as well. We routinely kicked grown men out for coming in and harassing women. That was not something we tolerated in the slightest. I would have one staff member stay with the woman, and I would personally escort the man off the premises. He was never allowed back in the store. We gained such a safe reputation that even non-customers would come into the store so we could chase away the creeps. I have been swung at, spit on, had things thrown at me, screamed at, threatened, followed to my car, and pulled out of my car. But I would do it all again in a heartbeat to make sure another woman is safe. Story 30. Honestly, I didn't know there was something like a safe word at bars and such. I can completely understand why. Some people are super creeps. Several years ago, my wife, several of our friends, and I went to a favorite spot for drinks and dancing. We had been there about 10 minutes, patiently waiting in line to get drinks at the bar. That was when I noticed a young lady who looked very uncomfortable with a young man leaning over her, holding her arm, talking at her, and obviously creeping her out. I looked at my wife, who hadn't noticed, and told her to hang on. There was something I had to do, although I was pretty nervous. I'm not a confrontational person. I didn't know how this was going to play out, but I had to try. I walked up to her, gently placed my hand on her back, and with a big smile said, "Hey, I'm so sorry I'm late. We got caught up at a friend's house and I finally got here. I'm so sorry." Then I turned to the guy, looked to her, and asked, "Hey, who is this?" I introduced myself and stuck out my hand. The guy instantly backed off, mumbled some words, and left her alone for the rest of the night. I introduced myself to her and told her to come find me or some staff members if the man approached her again, which he did not. I then went on my way. She and her friends seemed to have a good time afterward and later approached me to thank me for stepping in. I'm glad I was there, glad I was aware, and glad I had the courage to step in and get him to back off. I don't know if her situation would have escalated, but thankfully we will never have to find out. So, if you see someone in a situation like this, take the chance and step up to help. The worst case is you might look like a thoughtful idiot, but there is no harm in trying to help. Story 31. I once asked the bartender, "I would like a red drink." He looked confused and said, "Is this code for something? This is my first day." Story 32. I used it once to get away from a strange woman who kept trying to grope me, and I was laughed at. I had to leave without even finishing my drink. Story 33. Not quite what you were looking for, but my friends and I have a code phrase called pineapple. If someone texts you the word pineapple, you immediately call them and make up a reason for them to leave. I have done it when dates have gotten creepy, and a friend once used pineapple to get out of continuing to drink with his old army buddies. Story 34. I was in Syracuse for a short work trip. I had a drink at the hotel bar and started chatting with a man a few seats down. We ended up going to a nearby bar, but my instincts told me something was wrong and this would not end well. He ordered me a drink from the other side of the bar, which was strange. I took it to the bathroom and poured it out. Then, I saw a sign about using a code word to tell staff if you were uncomfortable. I went to the bar, said the word to one of the bartenders, and she immediately took me out through the back without a scene and drove me to my hotel. She texted me the next morning to check on me. I often think about her kindness and selflessness in helping a stranger in a time of need. We shared a ride to the bar. When I disappeared to the bathroom and then went back to the hotel, he called and texted repeatedly. He was angry that I left him, even though I had only met him an hour earlier. Story 35. The bartender quietly pulled a gun on my date and instructed me to back away slowly with them, holding my date at gunpoint until we were out the back door. Story 36. Just for your information, in America most bartenders will recognize an angel shot as a call for help. If you need it, do not hesitate. I have never had anyone order one from me or my former staff, but it is fairly common from my experience. Story 37. A girl in a late-night restaurant or bar did not look well, appearing either very intoxicated or drugged. I spoke to staff about contacting Angela and sending her to the girl. The doorman spoke with her and the man she was with. The man became aggressive and was taken outside. Several doormen restrained him briefly. They found a syringe with liquid and a bottle with a pipette on him. The man refused to explain what the liquids were. Police were called. Other patrons heard that this man might have drugged someone and tried to assault him but were unsuccessful. Some women also attempted to get attention, claiming he had drugged or tried to drug them, even though they had arrived after him and the original girl. Story 38. I was working expo in the kitchen late at night. When Dylan, our other bartender, went home, it was just Jamie. A girl handed Jamie $1 with something written on it. Jamie came into the kitchen to have me and another cook engage the guy to keep his attention while my buddy walked her to her car. Once she was safe, we told him to pay his bill and leave. We voided her bill and took it as a store expense. It was worth it. Story 39. Our local arcade bar has Zelda Master Sword pieces of paper that you can tear off from a larger sheet, similar to a help wanted ad. You take it to the bar for assistance. You do not have to say anything, just slide it to the bartender. The paper features the quote, "It's dangerous to go alone," along with an explanation of the purpose of the sword at the bar. Story 40. My question is, and the reason I would be hesitant to use it myself has always been how it is supposed to be a discrete code word. Phrases like, "as for Angela," are advertised in every venue and on social media. If you know what it means, why would the person you are trying to escape not know? Story 41. These two girls just straight up told me, "Hey, this guy has been bothering us." "Oh, why didn't you say anything? We tried to get your attention, but you were busy." "I apologize. We'll get this guy out of here now." The other bartenders and I convinced him to leave. I bought the ladies some drinks for the trouble. Story 42. I did the opposite once. I ordered a certain drink because I was told it was good. The bartender gave it to me and billed me $400, which I found out the next day. I drank the drink and ended up poisoned. I had to file a police report the next day and get drug tested. An investigation was launched, the bar was sued extensively and shut down, and the owner and bartender were arrested. I was young and did not think to sue, but once it hit the papers, everyone else did. Story 43. Well-trained staff can make an incredible difference in de-escalating and preventing unsafe situations. One time, bar staff saw a man hitting on me at a gay bar, and I am a woman. They swooped in within about 20 seconds and asked if he was bothering me before I could even process what was happening. I can handle my own and deal with difficult people, but I was impressed by that response. They had clearly seen that happen before and were prepared for it. Story 44. I asked for an angel shot once. The bartender asked who. I said the man in the blue shirt. He was getting a little aggressive. The man pulled out a foam dart gun and said, "Hey, blue shirt, I have a bullet for you." Story 45. Not quite the same thing, but I'm a guy who doesn't care about publicly shaming creeps. No secret drinks, no code words. I will name and shame them. A few years ago, I started organizing outings for people who were vaccinated in New York City and wanted to start going out again. I had run a few of these through a local meetup group and reached the point where I hosted follow-up events for people who had attended one of my previous outings, along with one or two new participants. Vaccination cards were verified before attending. We all went to a restaurant, and I noticed that one of the new men was taking an interest in the woman next to him. I observed while chatting with others at my end of the table. The moment I saw him put his hand on her thigh and noticed her uncertainty about how to react, I loudly said, "Hey, Ryan, buddy, we keep our hands to ourselves. Okay? Put both hands on the table where I can see them and keep them there." He behaved for a few more minutes, but then did it again. So I said, "I told you to keep your hands off her. Now you leave. Get up. I'll cover your tab." He tried to make excuses and insisted on paying to buy more time, but I said, "I'm serious. Leave and don't ever do that again. That's not acceptable ever." He left and we continued with our night. As soon as I got home, I reported his real name and username to the moderators of the subreddit. They told me he matched the description of a prior complaint about Orion at a Central Park meetup, but they never had his username. Luckily, because I was verifying vaccination for attendees beforehand, I had extensive information on him, and even more because he insisted on sending me money via a payment app. Ryan, wherever you are, I hope you've learned to keep your hands to yourself. Story 46. A girl came up to me in a bar, grabbed my arms, kissed me on the lips and said, "Hey, baby." She winked at me and kissed me one more time, probably to hide my face. I smiled and then saw the man behind her at the bar scowling at me. I looked at the girl and said, "Hey, how was work?" She turned to the man and said, "See, I told you he's my boyfriend. Now leave me alone." She went back to her table of girlfriends and bought our table around. I never saw her again. She never returned to the bar, and I'm glad she didn't because he was there often. But I know how much she appreciated that, and I was happy to do it. Story 47. A couple of men tried to physically escort me out of the bar to their car. It was just them, the bartender, and me in the place. I told them I needed to use the restroom and gave the bartender a very pointed look on the way there. Thankfully, he understood. I heard an argument through the door but could not make out the details. A few minutes later, he knocked on the bathroom door and told me they gave up and left. The bartender made sure I was okay until closing, then drove me home. I am pretty sure I would not be here if it were not for that bartender looking after me. Story 48. Not quite a safe word situation, but an advisory tale. In a bar where someone was being a creep to a friend. She was wearing a very low-cut top, so he thought that was an invitation to snap some pictures from the next table over for his collection without asking. Gross. I advised him, without swearing or threats of violence, that this wasn't acceptable and he would have to delete the photos. His friend decided to try and play the big man. Fortunately, he must have drunk enough not to immediately see that they were outnumbered 2-12, so they swiftly realized this was a non-starter. I went to the bar to cool off because I was definitely in a fighting mood at that point, and let's be honest, that's never a good time anywhere with a large amount of glassware. No matter how much of a tough guy you want to tell yourself you are, someone's getting hurt and it might be someone you care about, so why risk it? Even if you dish out some damage, you're risking catching a charge. At the bar, a friend asked the score and I filled them in. They were up for a fight. I said let's leave it, but at this point the bar staff overheard. They were obviously annoyed people were having fighting talk in their premises, so I filled them in on exactly why I was giving the situation a 20-foot distance to avoid being the problem. Turns out dive bars staffed by women really don't like creeps. I have never seen so many baseball bats pulled so quickly. A very short conversation was had by the staff with the creep and his friend. camera was smashed. They were ejected immediately afterward. I was told very firmly that if there was ever a next time, to tell the staff first and let them handle it. Too long. Didn't read. Women who work dive bars can very swiftly be the F*** off portion of the F*** around. Find out, equation. Don't be a hero if someone's being a creep. Just talk to the staff straight from the beginning and let them do their job. Unless you're in a real rough place, the staff aren't going to let that sort of thing happen on their watch. If you're in a bar and can't see a single person on staff who you think might help you out in a tight spot, don't drink there. Story 49. A bit off topic. I was riding a bus in Sydney, and two men were sitting next to each other. One was big and the other was small. The big man kept saying demeaning things to the small man, but I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. My best guess was that this was some kind of master and subordinate relationship, but I wasn't sure, so I stayed on the bus and got off when they did. I followed them, and the big man's behavior continued. Eventually, he noticed me and asked why I was following them. I said I just wanted to make sure they were okay while looking at the small man. He didn't say anything, but the big man and I didn't argue for long before I noticed the small man starting to look around to get away from the situation. That's when I knew I had to keep the conversation going. I still don't know if something was wrong or if they just had a strange relationship, but I gave the small man a way out. Story 50. I completely froze in the only situation where I could have used something like that, but I was lucky because the bartender saw that I needed help. A male in my early 20s, was in a somewhat shady club that opens when others are closing and stays open until around 9 or 10 a.m. There was an old, gay drinker who apparently was into short, fat, and hairy hippies. He should seek therapy for this. At first, he just talked to me, which was fine, but then he started following me wherever I went and repeatedly asked if I wanted to come home with him, which I repeatedly denied. Later in the evening, actually early morning, he repeatedly tried to get closer. The bartender then saw how this man tried to reach between my legs in front of the bar and almost moved at warp speed to come around the bar, politely escort the man out, and make sure he knew he was no longer welcome. As he returned, the bartender came to me and asked, while massaging his right hand, if I needed someone to talk to or if I wanted to go to the backstage lounge to calm down. He also told me to just ask if I would feel safer having someone accompany me when I went home. The club may look shady and is filled with people who should have gone home long ago, but the old punks who run this place have a heart of gold, sadly not the so-called spaceship, which could be one of the reasons they built this safe haven for freaks, outsiders, and friends of mind-altering substances. P.S. I should mention that the people who work there would have acted earlier, and most likely less drastically, if they had seen me. You can read my face like a book when I'm stressed. Those for toddlers, with simple words and giant letters. But I never thought it would be a good idea to go closer to someone sober enough to help me. Instead, I tried to get away on my own because of my questionable condition and a beginning meltdown I had due to the unwanted touching. The beer, the environment at a concert and in the club afterward, the long time I had already been awake, and so on probably also didn't help my autistic brain to function as it should. Story 51. I went to a queer kink event and took too many gummies, which caused a panic attack. I was distressed, crying and telling my friends they could stay while I would leave. Their responses made me cry even more as they said, "There will be more parties. We just want to make sure you are okay. So we are all leaving." This made me cry harder. A security guard approached us and asked if I needed assistance, which made me burst out laughing in the middle of the panic attack. I said, "No, these are my friends." He explained that he just needed to make sure I was not being forced to do anything due to the nature of the event, which made me smile. It is a fond memory of mine with my two friends. Lesson learned: do not go to a kink event high from gummies. It is comforting to know that security guards are looking out for us. Story 52. A man who was drunk and delusional at a pool hall played against me and my friend. He then became confrontational about whether we would play again and make a bet. He accused me of being a big talker, which was untrue, as I knew I was nowhere near his skill level. A young woman came over and insisted that I try her drink and share my opinion. As I did, she confronted the man and asked if he was bothering her friend. I assumed they were both regulars. She likely wanted to cause a fuss to involve others, and he eventually walked away. Story 53. Not the same thing, but I was working overnights at a gas station when two girls came in, and I could tell they were uncomfortable. Looking outside, I could see a group of guys at a pump, very drunk, and figured they were probably harassing them. I'm not the confrontational type, but I couldn't leave them to fend for themselves. When they came to check out, I asked if the guys outside were giving them problems. They said yes, but they also didn't want to make a scene. So I told them to act like they were friends of mine and that they could stay as long as they wanted, either until they felt brave enough to leave or until the men cleared out. They stayed. 20 minutes later, the guys left because they didn't want a chance going inside and causing a scene, I guess. The girls stayed for another hour after that, hanging out with me and just relaxing. We became actual friends after that, and they would stop by every now and then to see me. I don't work there anymore, but I still try to do what I can when I'm in a gas station at night and there are female cashiers on duty. Since disrespectful men only respect other men, I use myself as a deterrent any day. See something, say something. Story 54. Kind of related. My girlfriend was doing a training run for a half marathon, and I decided to join her on the bike for part of it. I was cycling a little behind, obviously following her. A man on a bike with two kids in the bike seat cycled past, stopped in front of her, looked at me and asked if she knew me. In hindsight, I must have looked super creepy just following behind. Mad respect to the man though. Story 55. Not exactly what you asked, but this seems to be what is trending in the comments. I had an apartment share with a friend who happens to be a woman. We are still friends 25 years later, by the way. No romantic attraction, more like siblings. This was in college. We would go out together quite often. Sometimes in groups, sometimes just the two of us. She had a line that she used on men she was not interested in. She would point across the bar or grab my arm and say, "I am going home with him." I just smiled and nodded. It worked every time. Story 56. I didn't use a safe word, but I was cornered by a man who kept touching me and trying to kiss me. I felt I couldn't get out because he had pretty much locked me in a corner and was much bigger and stronger. I also felt I had to keep things friendly to prevent escalation into something more dangerous, but I kept avoiding his kiss, saying I had a boyfriend. I started to feel very panicked the longer it continued. Suddenly, a server behind the bar came up to us and told the man, "Sorry, you're blocking the way if you keep standing here," which allowed me to quickly escape from his arms and walk over to a friend who hadn't seen what was happening. My friend and I left the bar as soon as possible, and I never looked back. It was a small intervention from the bartender, but it allowed me to walk away. Story 57. Not really answering the question, but I once went on a date to a bar, and the girl kept her coat on. I asked her why, and she said she was cold. Fair enough, I thought, it was winter. After about an hour and a half, she went to the restroom, and when she came back, she took her coat off and hung it over the back of the chair. I asked her if she felt warmer now and said that was good. She said she kept her coat on so she could make a quick getaway if I turned out to be weird or unsafe. But she thought about it in the restroom and decided she was safe with me, hence taking the coat off. It made me feel really good inside. It was a shame the relationship didn't last. But there we go. Story 58. I don't know if this counts, but when I was at college, we had a dinner with about 50 guys and two girls. One of them got very intoxicated, and people started to take advantage of her. I decided to leave with her and take her back to her room safely because I feared she might be assaulted. When I got her back, she literally jumped on me, wrapping her legs around me. She was far too intoxicated to make that kind of decision, so I gently explained that she was under the influence and needed to go to bed. She never spoke to me again out of embarrassment, until a reunion 15 years later, when she thanked me. Story 59. Not a safe word or a secret drink situation, but I am forever grateful to that girl. I live close to a tube station, and there is a tiny kebab place halfway to my home. There are always lots of people there, as everyone who walks into the blocks of flats passes it. One day, two drunk men were walking close to me, but I did not pay attention. I was lost in my thoughts and hungry. I entered the kebab place as it was the closest to my home. The two men followed me inside. I was in line to place an order, and they began making comments about me, becoming more aggressive. That is when I started to feel scared and uncomfortable. It was my turn to order, and the young woman at the counter loudly asked me if those two were with me. I said no. She then asked if I knew them. I said no. She then commanded the two men to leave. She had such a strong presence that the two men became silent, apologized, and left. I thanked her and left with my kebab. In this country where I live, tipping is not common, but if I had the chance, I would have tipped her. Story 60. About 20 years ago, while working at Blockbuster, I had a petite rocker girl as a coworker. A man came in and kept talking to her, refusing to leave. He kept insisting they should go to a concert that week. She was trying to ignore him. She had a boyfriend and was clearly not interested. I finally turned to the man and said, "Hey, read the room. She is not interested. Leave." He got flustered and started calling me jealous and insulting my weight. I told him to get lost and stop harassing her. He left, continuing to insult me. She thanked me and quickly went to the back, clearly scared and almost in tears. Later, her boyfriend came to the store and thanked me. Felt good. Story 61. It was not a safe word that I used, but I was at a club and I told two people on the bar staff about a difficult situation I was in. There was a man who was touching my leg very inappropriately. I went to another club and informed the staff when I saw him enter about what he had done to me. The first person was understanding and said they would look out for me. The second seemed disinterested and went to have a laugh with their friends on the staff team. Story 62. I was a regular at a bar where they knew me. I was on a bad date. The bathroom was in the basement, and there was a back door that led out from there. I gave the bartender a look. She met me down in the hallway. I told her I was going to leave and would be back in a bit to pay my tab. She unlocked the door for me and let me out. I came back a couple of hours later, paid my tab, and stayed for the rest of the night. Story 63. I have many stories from running a gay bar in a rough part of town near major transit stops. About a third of the customers were straight women, as it was common for them to escape from unwanted attention into our bar. What they didn't know is that we also knew all the security companies, bouncers around town, Hells Angels, and other notable groups, including about half the regular bar staff from other places. So we did keep tabs. Story 64. In the United Kingdom, we have Ask for Angela. But I had a girl do it when I worked at McDonald's. I said she was up in the office and took the girl through the kitchen before letting her out the back door. Story 65. Not someone who has used it, but I used to bartend and it did happen quite often. We would normally keep an eye out for the person and make an effort to kick them out immediately if we saw wrongdoing. We also had a policy that if that happened, the bar would call a taxi and make sure that whoever was in potential danger got out through the back unseen. Story 66. Not exactly the same, but I was at a music festival in a foreign country. It was dark. The event was on the beach. As I was walking along, I saw a young woman, clearly intoxicated and looking a bit stressed, but able to get around, with two young men following her. They did not seem to be her friends. She appeared to be trying to get away from them. She may have been acquainted with them, but at this point, they were not acting friendly towards her, and my internal alarms were going off. As they approached, I said to her, "Hey, I'm so happy I ran into you. It's been a while." She looked a little shocked, but I said, "I think our friends are this way. Come walk with me." She pulled back a little, and I said, "I just want to make sure you're okay. Are you safe?" It dawned on her what I was asking. The two men stayed at a distance but started to look disinterested. I asked her name. She told me. We were facing each other, holding both hands. She kissed my hands and said, "Thank you. I love you." Then she moved quickly away and disappeared into the crowd. The men tried to follow her but had trouble keeping up and appeared to lose track of her. I think about her now and again and hope she had a safe weekend. Story 67. I work security for a number of events and clubs, and I always wince a little when I see this topic come up. There are some places that have an advance plan in place as described, and that is great. However, many have nothing, no safe word, no fake drink to order. You also run the risk of your date knowing about this. Combine that with a waiter, waitress, or bartender who doesn't understand what you are trying to do. and you have made a bad situation worse. You are placing the responsibility of your safety into another person's hands who might have no idea what you mean. The best thing to do is find a way to separate yourself from the person and ask a staff member directly for help. Do not be coy or vague. State that you fear for your safety and need help. These types of discussions can give people a false sense of security, and I would hate to see someone's situation worsen because someone misunderstood the intended signal. Many people have asked for assistance like this, and it is always the ones who are clear about what is going on and what they need who are the easiest to help. Story 68. Can someone inform me of this safe word or secret drink? I had a really horrible experience late at night waiting for a morning bus in New York City. It ruined the city for me for a while and left me pretty shaken because I froze in a situation where I always thought I would fight. Story 69. When I was bartending, I had to let a girl out the back door while her date was buying drinks. I watched the man sit and wait for her to come back for about an hour. Story 70. A girl walked up to me and called me her brother, then whispered that a drunk man was touching her. I guided her to the side, and my friend went to talk to the man. He was completely sober and clueless, saying that he did not touch or talk to her. She started following us and told incoherent stories about her life. Later, she poured her drink on my friend. I still wonder about her motivation or if she was lying, but if someone asks for help, you should always believe them. Story 71. Before safe words were a thing, I was out with a friend and a group of men kept buying us shots at the bar. One of the men was being a little handsy but still manageable. When they ordered a third round, I leaned over and asked the bartender if he could give us water shots instead, as the men were pretty drunk and would not have noticed. Instead, the bartender turned to the men and said, "The women want double shots," and everyone cheered. I remember feeling betrayed, unsafe, and on the verge of tears. The bartender had a smirk on his face as he watched my reaction. We immediately left, likely without paying the bill, and never returned to that bar again. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.